Presumption of innocence. I know that they have a great, strong case with the video.
Well, okay, Mr. Leslie, are you able to say...
Marcella Zoa leaving court today after the teen was charged in connection with the balcony chair toss that had Toronto talking. The 19-year-old has been charged with mischief, endangering life, damaging property, and being a common nuisance. Police allege she is the woman seen throwing a chair off of a high-rise condo, an act that's angered people right across the GTA. Chris Glover is live outside the building where it all went down. And Chris, Zoa is now out on bail.
She's out on a $2,000 bail and has to stay with her mom. And as a part of her bail conditions, she's not allowed to come to this building where the alleged chair tossing happened over the weekend.
I'm okay.
Marcella Zoya had nothing to share other than the odd smile and laugh as she left court.
She wished it never happened. Of course, she would never wish anybody would be hurt.
Prior to allegedly posing for this now infamous video hurling a chair off a high-rise balcony over an expressway, the 19-year-old Torontonian posed regularly for her 5,000 followers on social media and served bottle service at downtown clubs.
It was grossly irresponsible behavior that could have caused serious injury and death, and that is just not something that can be tolerated.
After days of public outrage, police tracked her down but allowed her to turn herself in.
She's cooperative.
Tyler Walton says she stayed in the same 45th floor Airbnb suite right after the chair tossing incident.
I got a message at about 3:30 from my host saying that it wasn't going to be ready till 5:30 because the previous people who stayed there had actually left it a disaster.
Right away, Walton noticed the chairs in the short-term rental listing were gone.
I recognized the chairs as the ones on the sidewalk, and that's when I kind of clued in like, I noticed we didn't have any patio chairs on the balcony.
Walton spent plenty of time on the balcony celebrating her birthday and her first time in an Airbnb.
I think it just needs to be regulated a little bit more, like the fact that the host wasn't aware that she was missing patio furniture until like maybe the next day.
A similar Toronto chair toss video popped up in December. The group Fairbnb says regulations are desperately needed.
There's nothing surprising there. Everyone knows about it. The city knows about it. We have rules in place. Airbnb hosts have appealed these rules.
But back to this incident and the big question everyone has, why?
Why did she do it, though? Why?
Just above your head.
Can you explain that, Marcella?
No, she has no comment on that. It's a case like any other case. There's a presumption of innocence.
Her lawyer says she has no adult criminal record, but she'll be back in court next month. And Dwight, the residents who live in this building today received a letter from the condo board telling them not to throw anything over the balcony, that it would be dangerous, and that they also could face charges. Now, Airbnb also released a statement today saying that a guest account that they believe is linked to this incident has been suspended pending an investigation. And one final point, just as I've been standing here, several people have come. It seems like this really is the talk of the town today.
Yeah, it really is. And we shouldn't have to tell people not to throw stuff off balconies like that. Thank you, Chris. Traffic on the 401 westbound in Milton is moving again tonight after a major pileup. Remarkably, no one was seriously hurt in the crash, which involved more than 20 cars and trucks. You can see damage to some of the vehicles was extensive. It happened earlier this afternoon, shutting down traffic in the westbound lanes and leading to a 10K backup. It's a trip that's supposed to take a little more than 5 hours, but an Oakville man is describing a painful experience on an Air Canada flight to Victoria. He boarded his plane last night, but was stuck on the tarmac for nearly 7 hours. Farmer Morelli joins us now. And Farah, these delays must have had something to do with the storm.
They sure did, Dwight. No surprise there. Canada has confirmed that those delays had everything to do with that storm that we saw yesterday. But that's not exactly what this man is taking issue with. He has a problem, he says, with the way Air Canada handled this situation. He says he was left in the dark about what would happen if he got off the plane and whether he'd be able to get back on.
This was a scene at Toronto's Pearson Airport yesterday. Heavy snow, poor visibility, and flights grounded. One of those planes was David Kitchen's.
Everything just seemed to, no pun intended, everything just snowballed. It was just one thing after another.
This flight tracker shows the path of that Air Canada flight going in circles before even taking off. It had to be de-iced at least once. There were delays. It idled so long it had to be refueled. Through it all, he says, no meals were served.
probably around 3 or 4 hours. Again, I was in business class. We got a bottle of water and a small bag of nuts. We didn't get food probably till 7 to 7 hours and 15 minutes. Just after we'd taken off, obviously, once we got to cruising altitude. So probably got food around 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
After 4 hours on board, Kitchen says they were told they could get off the plane, but says they weren't given any details about being allowed back on.
He said we could deplane, but again, there's all this information missing. We didn't know what our options were. We didn't know if Air Canada would be booking us on flights the next day or if we'd be getting some kind of refund.
So you boarded the plane around 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
What time did you actually depart?
So we departed, I believe it was about 6 hours and 40 minutes later, so about 2:40 a.m.
Passenger rights advocates say Air Canada quietly changed its rules last year to allow passengers to remain on the tarmac for longer.
Air Canada abruptly changed its terms and conditions from 90 minutes to 4 hours. We believe it is unlawful, and as a result, we already in May last year launched a complaint against Air Canada.
As for David, he says he didn't get the answers he needed from cabin crew.
Flew out here to attend the funeral of a friend of mine's mother. So, and that takes place on Thursday. So, at the end of the day, I had to basically stay on that plane and hope that it got out of there.
So, Farah, what's Air Canada saying about all of this?
Dwight, Air Canada issued us a statement late today which essentially said that announcements were made throughout this flight and it did offer some snacks and some waters, but because it only offers food for purchase on board now, it didn't have enough meals for everybody, and that's why it didn't give out food to all the passengers. It said it understands the frustration, but in terms of compensation, it says that yesterday was just such a crazy day with cancellations and delays. It's still assessing how to assist passengers who went through ordeals like David's yesterday.
Thank you, Farah. And weather probably, as we heard there, played a role in that, spending 7 hours on a tarmac. So we think it's all over, but you're telling us that it's not over yet, Colette.
No, we're still not out of this one because the winds kind of left behind by it are still posing problems for travel, and that's why we have the winter weather travel advisory in place. All the areas you see here, which includes the city, the GTA in this turquoisey blue color, goes around Hamilton towards Niagara Falls, and it's just because we've been getting these streamers, these lake effect streamers. They're bursts of snow, visibility goes to zero basically, and then also some of the blowing snow because the winds are still strong. Those winds have been shifting a little bit west to southwest, so that also tends to shift these streamers that we're seeing. But you can see a heavier burst here right now up near the 407 there through Vaughan. That is passing through, but at the moment it makes things pretty tricky for travel on the roadways, probably through the airways as well. Our current temperatures out there, so it sits at -4 for Toronto, but then we factor again these winds playing a role, and so it makes it feel colder than that. Right now our wind chill is -11. That'll be dropping a little further as we head towards the morning hours, feeling more like about -13, -15 in there with the wind chill. What's ahead? Well, we get rid of this as the winds ease up overnight tonight, becoming partly cloudy, so that's some improvement. But another system headed towards us for tomorrow. I think we'll start to see some wet flurries into the afternoon hours, towards the early evening, then kind of mixing with rain showers overnight, or maybe even some ice pellets as the temperature comes up towards freezing, and then moving out Friday morning. Again, wet snow. This one doesn't have a lot of moisture to play with, so we're not talking about heavy accumulations at all. Overnight tonight, -6, feeling like -12 to -13, and 0 for the high tomorrow, feeling like -6, Dwight.
Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Police have released the name of the man gunned down at a Scarborough apartment building yesterday. Investigators say 25-year-old Dean Howlett was found in the stairwell of a high-rise near Lawrence and Galloway. He died at the scene. Building residents say Howlett was an up-and-coming rapper who went by the name Streets. Police are hoping to speak to any witnesses or anyone with information on what led to the shooting. This week, a CBC News and CBC Sports investigation revealed shocking numbers involving the abuse of young athletes by coaches. Today, there was a not guilty verdict in one very high-profile case. Dave Brubaker, former head coach of the women's national gymnastics team, was cleared of sexual assault and sexual exploitation of a former student. Devin Haru has the details for us from Sarnia.
On one side of the courtroom, applause, and on the other, disappointment. And in the middle of it all, Dave Brubaker hugging his wife Liz, who was in tears when they learned of the judge's not guilty decision. And this all came down to credibility of investigation, and the judge having scathing remarks for the lead investigating officer in this case. At the beginning of it, in fact, this trial was delayed because of this information. We learned that the lead investigating officer and the complainant are related. In fact, the complainant is the godmother of the lead officer's child. And so that compromised a lot of this investigation, and that inevitably led to the judge making her not guilty decision. We're also learning today that Gymnastics Canada has started their own internal investigation of Dave Brubaker. He's been suspended from Gymnastics Canada as that played out. High intensity, high emotion in the courthouse here today, but Dave Brubaker, the former national women's gymnastics coach for Canada, found not guilty. Devin Haru, CBC News, Sarnia.
All this week, CBC News and CBC Sports have looked into sexual offenses by amateur sports coaches. You can view more in the Shattered Trust series online. Just head to cbcnews.ca. A translation firm has raked in millions from government contracts and other clients. So why haven't dozens of workers here in the GTA been paid for their work for the company?
$14,000 is not a small amount.
It's quite an amount actually to me. It's really frustrating, and I just don't know how to describe that kind of feelings.
That CBC Toronto investigation coming up. The firestorm over Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation and pressure to help SNC-Lavalin avoid criminal prosecution continues to burn in Ottawa. Though MPs are on a break, members of the All-Party Justice Committee held an emergency meeting this afternoon to discuss how to get to the bottom of things. Julie Van Duzen is following the story from our parliamentary bureau. So, what did the Justice Committee conclude today, Julie?
Well, Dwight, the Liberals used their majority to block the attempt to hear from Jody Wilson-Raybould and key officials from the Prime Minister's office. Instead, they offered up a pared-down list of what the opposition was looking for that did not include Raybould or these other key officials, but instead included the current Justice Minister, David Lametti, the clerk of the Privy Council, but the opposition argued, these are not at the heart of the matter. They argued, how will we ever find out if Jody Wilson-Raybould, when she was Justice Minister, was pressured, as the allegations contend, to cut a deal for SNC-Lavalin to help it avoid prosecution. So it became quite a heated committee, but we'll take a listen to what the opposition was saying and the Liberals.
Are they going to help the Prime Minister cover this up, or are they going to help Canadians find out what happened here?
People that have been alleged to be involved in what is one of the most serious cases that I've seen in my life in politics are not on your list.
To have her come before this committee would be to invite her to speak about things that she simply cannot talk about.
Okay, so Julie, what happens next?
Well, the Ethics Commissioner, Dwight, is looking at the allegations. He's examining them, but the opposition says that's not the same thing as having witnesses appear at a committee. So they're quite frustrated by this, and they're looking at other options. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister was asked again about the version of events today, and he said his government did what it had to do. It did nothing wrong, and Wilson-Raybould, if she had concerns about being pressured, she should have said so, which he says she didn't. So take a listen.
They should be very worried about whether or not we're going to use other avenues that we have. People are asking whether or not there's going to be a judicial inquiry. People are asking whether or not this is going to get studied at the Senate. There are lots of options.
It was her responsibility to come and speak to me directly about that. She did not do that in the fall, and she accepted another position in this government when I made the cabinet shuffle. So we are going to continue to work hard.
So we'll see what happens next week when the House is back. We do know that Jody Wilson-Raybould has hired a lawyer and is consulting on what she can say and not say, so there may be developments there next week. And for sure, the opposition is saying they won't let what the Liberals did today smother this issue.
I know Canadians are waiting to hear from her. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely.
It's official, Jeremy Lin is a Raptor after signing a new contract with the team in the last hour. I'm Greg Ross at Scotiabank Arena, where Lin is getting set to play in his first game as a Raptor. We'll have details on that coming up.
The weather update is brought to you by Train Extreme Conditions Testing. It's hard to stop a train, really hard. Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Everybody has somebody, somewhere, somehow.
Is Toronto still seen as representative as the city itself? There are concerns that diversity on stage has flatlined. Still ahead, how some are hoping to change that 50 years after Toronto's first black theatre companies hit the city.
Most times you get hired to be in a show, but it's really a white show. So you're just hired to be a white performer who happens to be black.
If you want to know the answer, let me tell you now.
It gave you an opportunity to actually work on shows that hooked into your culture, your life.
Dozens of workers in this city say they are being stiffed by one of the country's largest translation firms. Able Translations has raked in millions from government contracts and well-known corporate clients, but now allegations of unpaid taxes and hundreds of lawsuits are plaguing the company. Lisa Shing has more.
Despite it being the middle of a workday, Able Translations is dark, the door is locked, and there's a sign. This is a secure environment, access by appointment only, and please email abletranslations.com. So, well, we'll see if we can get in. Dozens of former contract interpreters and translators had similar experiences when trying to get the money they're owed. Chang Ye-ding immigrated to Canada from China in 2006. He worked on and off for Able for the last decade, translating workers' comp letters and interpreting in Mandarin and Cantonese in medical appointments and legal proceedings.
It's really frustrating, and I just don't know how to describe that kind of feelings.
His payment stopped in March 2017. He finally sued about a year later when the company owed him $14,000. Since then, he's only seen about $2,000.
I mean, $14,000 is not a small amount.
Really, yeah, especially to me, it's really it's quite an amount actually to me. We have to pay the utilities, we have to pay the mortgage.
In the summer, he and Able reached terms of a settlement. Ding says his requests were reasonable. 12 installments, third week September, each payment to be $1,200.
But no one
That's
was paid.
reasonable. It seems reasonable.
Really reasonable, really low. And this
And no
amount,
interest.
this amount, there's no interest in this amount, and I give up the interest.
And then you
all
filed.
the court fees, all those.
Yeah, you waived all of that.
I will all that, right? Yeah.
CBC discovered at least 245 lawsuits have been filed against Able Translations since 2014. That's throughout Canada, including Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, and Toronto. Plaintiffs came from as far as Egypt and South Korea. There have also been more than 120 complaints to Ontario's Ministry of Labour. And Able, run by husband and wife duo Annabelle and Wilson Teixeira, owes $700,000 in taxes. A sister company owes about the same. Since CBC's first story, major organizations that used Able, like the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board and Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta, have dropped them, but not University Health Network, though it's starting the process.
We're still using them because we need the translation services, and there aren't lots of companies that provide the breadth and depth of translation that Able does.
Okay, so we saw you peeking in windows, knocking on doors there. Were you able to contact Able Translations at all?
Not really, Dwight. So we started reaching out back in the fall with 8 pages of details, and they wrote back at the time saying our information is not correct. So we tried multiple times to get in touch so they could elaborate, but Dwight, no luck there at all.
Okay, so what's happening now with all of those lawsuits?
So hundreds of them, as I said, some of them have settled, others are still going through the court case, but we spoke with a number of experts who say Able is likely using delay tactics in some of these lawsuits to avoid paying up, though of course it's really impossible to know the reason, and as we speak they're still operating in some capacity, Dwight.
Yeah, feeling bad for some of those translators. Thank you, Lisa. Remember, if you have a story you would like us to look into, just send us an email, torontotips@cbc.ca. Toronto police have decided not to lay criminal charges against a former RCMP doctor accused of sexual assault. The force says there are no grounds to do so. Last month, CBC News revealed that 30 women had come forward alleging assaults during medical exams in the late 80s and early 90s. And several of the women who brought their story to CBC are outraged. Dave Seglins has the story.
He's rubbing my legs up and down, and he starts to pull at my nipples, and I asked, why are you doing that?
He was getting his jollies under the guise of being a doctor for the RCMP.
These 3 women went public for the first time, detailing what they say were sexual assaults by an RCMP doctor during mandatory medical exams back when they were new recruits. And in 1989, they complained to the RCMP, Ontario's College of Physicians and Surgeons, and Toronto Police about Dr. John McDougall. But the women believe it was all swept under the rug. McDougall kept his job.
Last year, amidst the Me Too movement, 30 women stepped forward. They filed fresh complaints, and Toronto Police reopened an investigation. But we've just learned that investigators will not lay charges.
The Toronto Police Service does not dispute that these women felt and continue to feel violated, a spokesperson wrote in a statement. Investigators did research into what may have been acceptable medical practice at the time, and they concluded there was no evidence to, quote, prove there was a sexual purpose for the actions that took place. Without those grounds, we simply could not lay charges. The three women are furious, shocked that anyone might think that the exams were medically acceptable.
It's still inappropriate behavior that's conducted to a woman in an office behind closed doors in secret, and still under the threat of you do this or I'm going to have your job or you won't get a job.
I don't know what to say. It's absolutely devastating after all of our efforts.
As for the doctor, he denied any wrongdoing decades ago. Today, he's in his 80s, in poor health, in a retirement home, and through his family, he has declined to comment.
While the police investigation is over, these women say they will continue to fight. For one, they're pushing forward with a $135 million class action lawsuit, and they're calling on Ontario's top police watchdog to review the handling of this case. Dave Seglin, CBC News, Toronto.
With little notice, their home could be gone for a condo. No compensation and no guarantee they'll be able to move into the new building. After the break, why your rights as a renter depends on the type of apartment you're living in. We'll be right back. Renters, did you know that your rights depend on the type of apartment you live in? Buildings with fewer than 6 units do not have the same protections as larger ones. And as Ali Chiasson reports, that can result in quick evictions without compensation.
That's unfair. It's totally unfair because it doesn't matter how many units.
That's someone's home, Serge Grinkoff's home, and 2 other tenants who rent apartments here.
It's like all of a sudden, 3 weeks ago, the property manager sent me a mail, and then she came here and put that sign in front. We know that they're gonna rebuild the property. They're planning to put little condominium.
And because the current building only has 3 units, the landlord can go ahead and evict everyone with no compensation and no guarantees to move back into the remodel.
I don't have a protection, no compensation whatsoever. That's really hard.
And then overnight you're told you're out of here and you don't know what to do now. There isn't enough affordable housing in the city. You are completely on your own. What's at stake is people's basic ability to live in Toronto.
Councillor Josh Matlow is going to put forward a motion at an upcoming council meeting encouraging his fellow members to call on the province to close this loophole. That could have Stephanie Churcher scrambling to look for another place within the year.
You had plans to stay there maybe 5+ years?
Yes, definitely.
And then how soon after you moved in did you get that notice?
3 days.
Regardless of how the Committee of Adjustment rules, Churcher says she'll be okay, but she worries about
those with lower income, those with fixed income, like our growing elderly population, who, if they were in the same situation, where do they go?
For the people who watch this story and they worry about where they live, I don't know, what should they do?
They should be contacting their MPP and demanding that that protections that tenants have in multi-residential buildings are extended to tenants who live in smaller buildings.
It doesn't matter how many units, everyone should be treated equally.
A tenant is a tenant.
Yeah, a tenant is a tenant.
Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Some Toronto high-rises may soon be getting inspected by city officials, and it could mean those buildings will have to make do without power for a short time.
In order to inspect, for example, thoroughly inspect an electrical system, you have to turn it off. And this, we've seen, can cause in and of itself, just the inspection, some degree of disruption.
The mayor says the inspections are necessary to prevent recurrence of what recently happened at 2 St. Jamestown high-rises. 650 Parliament Street was hit by an electrical fire last August, displacing hundreds of residents. Then just last month, a building in the same complex experienced a burst pipe, which flooded the electrical room. So the city is going to begin reviewing all high-rises. Once buildings with potential problems are identified, they will be inspected. The mayor adding that landlords need to do a better job of keeping their properties in a state of good repair. The snow, ice, and Arctic air that's hit southern Ontario in the past few weeks has made travel difficult. But one Presto user says the long delays on the GO train during rough weather are costing her more than just time.
It's just been sort of taking money left and right from my Presto account, and then I've only noticed because it seemed lower than it should have been, but because I have auto load, which I think a lot of people do on Presto, you might not even notice.
She says because she could not tap off in time during storm delays, extra charges added up to more than $45. She has been promised a refund from Metrolinx. It turns out the GO system has a 3-hour window for trips, which is enough on normal days. If it does take longer than that, Metrolinx suggests you not tap off and check your balance, then call customer service if you see a problem.
And now we have our own Taiwanese basketball player in the NBA, and it's really something special.
Every immigrant, especially we have Asian background, that proves that you can still doing a very good job in Western culture.
Almost 7 years to the day, it's Linsanity round 2, and this time Jeremy Lin is playing for the right team. And now it's official. The Raptors announced the signing of Lin just over an hour ago, and just in time. They have a game in just a few minutes. Greg Ross is live inside Scotiabank Arena. And Greg, the question everyone wants to know, is Lin in tonight?
Well, that's a great question, Dwight, and the answer is yes. And this all coming down within the last hour, as you mentioned. Jeremy Lin clears waivers from the Atlanta Hawks and then immediately signs a new contract with the Toronto Raptors and not wasting any time, deciding that he will play in this game tonight against the Washington Wizards. Coach Nick Nurse spoke before the game and talked about what role he expects Lin to play with the team.
Listen, he's a good player, right? So it's we want to get good players on the floor. So we could all see him here shortly, which is good. I'm excited to see him. I think he has improved. I think he continues to, play like a more experienced player. He's good with the ball. Shooting improved. I think he's tougher than he looks. Maybe fights, competes, good IQ, all those things. So let's see what he looks like in a Raptor jersey tonight.
Lin comes to the Raptors averaging nearly 11 points in 51 games with the Atlanta Hawks this season. And Dwight, you mentioned that big moment here at Scotiabank Arena almost 7 years ago to the day. It was Valentine's Day 2012. Lin then here playing for the Knicks and part of a breakout year for Jeremy Lin that year. And he came and he scored a big buzzer beater for the Knicks to help beat the Raptors and really had the crowd here in Scotiabank Arena on their feet. And he really captured the imagination of many people in Toronto's Taiwanese and Chinese communities. I spoke with one reporter today who says, while he's not expected to make a huge impact on the court for the Raptors, it's the impact that he's going to have off the court with many Raptors fans.
For the Asian community, for a lot of us, we've just never seen someone that looks like us perform at this high level, whether it's in the NBA or any other major professional sports leagues.
And what is it about him that gives him that global appeal?
Yeah, first of all, I think anyone in sports that watches sports likes an underdog story, and he was that guy. Like before Linsanity happened, he was on his way possibly out of the NBA, and then suddenly he's blowing up the entire league. He's on back-to-back Sports Illustrated covers. He was on the cover of Time magazine. Like it was bigger than a sports story, right?
And it really was an incredible story back then in 2012. Now, 7 years later, Lin comes here to Toronto, and he's going to play a backup role, but really perfect timing, Dwight, because the Raptors announcing that Fred VanVleet is going to miss at least the next 5 weeks with an injury, and that means that starting immediately, Lin becomes the number 2 point guard for the Raptors behind Kyle Lowry.
Yeah, it is perfect timing at that. Thank you, Greg. And when Colette is not helping us navigate this crazy weather we've been having, she's a big ball fan.
I am a big ball fan. That's where I'd like to be tonight. Hey, I don't want you to be out on these roadways. We're still having problems out here and still have advisories, blowing snow, still seeing some of these squalls, bursts of snow that really reduce the visibility. So they're going to be easing off into the later evening hours and overnight as the winds ease off. But blowing snow advisories for the areas you see in the light blue. But for the city, we're still looking right in here that we do have issues here with the winter weather travel advisory, which is actually what's in play there. Current temperatures -4. We've got the winds, though, to factor in there, so it does feel cooler than that, and the wind chill by tomorrow morning dropping to about -13. Here's a look at one of those bursts of snowfall. You see that up there along the 407. As I said, it's been kind of moving on. It was much more linear, you see earlier, and now as the winds ease up even a little bit and just change direction, they've been kind of going west-southwest and then back towards the west. So as they do and get a little bit lighter, we'll see some of these streamers starting to disappear, or at least shrinking here on our radar. Now, what happens once that goes through? We go to partly cloudy skies overnight tonight. But there's another system that's going to move through tomorrow, later in the day. It's mostly going to have an impact to the north of us, and it doesn't have much moisture associated with it like the last storm. However, into tomorrow afternoon or early evening, and especially northward, we're going to see some wet flurries moving through. And then overnight Thursday, as we get into the later evening and overnight, seeing that change to a mix, could even be a brief period of some ice pellets before, especially from the 401 southward, it comes over to a rain shower event because the temperature will be rising there close to the freezing mark. And even by Friday morning, that temperature coming up a little bit above the freezing mark, and then it'll start to fall. So we're not talking about the accumulations here, maybe 1 to 2 centimeters, but very, very wet stuff. And again, then changing over to rain as we go through the city and for most of the GTA. Now, Friday afternoon, some stronger winds coming back behind that system could set up a few more squalls. But having a look at these winds as we go through the overnight, I know it doesn't look like they drop off terribly, but they do back off. And then the next system comes in, we see some stronger winds Thursday night into Friday morning. So if there is a little bit of wet flurry activity blowing around, and also could be reducing visibility once again for that Friday morning commute. Overnight tonight, -6 for us in Mississauga, -7 for you in Markham, and Toronto -6. And then into tomorrow afternoon, later in the day, mostly to the north and light stuff, but we are looking at some precipitation coming through the area there. And because of that temperature, that's why we get the differential with the types. Lingering into Friday morning, that temperature the warmest early in the day, then falling to -8 by overnight Friday into Saturday. We get sunshine Saturday, that's great, but colder air comes in, so our overnights are getting chillier. Sunday, you know, there's another system that's going to move through, but it looks like that storm will stay to the south of us. That's still a few days out. I'm keeping it to the south right now. A mix of sun and cloud, -4. Monday, sunshine, and look at that's the high on Monday. So we are taking a bit of a deep dive with our temperatures as we head into the beginning of next week, right? But at least drier, right?
Yeah, still a deep dive though. Thanks, Colette.
Yeah. You don't sound like you mean that, but you're welcome.
We'll talk later.
All right.
Ontario's deficit is going down.
Ontario is now projecting a deficit of $13.5 billion for 2018-19.
The finance minister says $1 billion from higher sales and income tax revenues pushed the deficit lower. But Vic Fidelis says there are challenges ahead. He cited uncertainty in the global economic outlook and Ontario's debt payments as examples. Fidelis says the province will pay $12.5 billion in interest on its debt this fiscal year. They are the country's newest citizens. After the break, the stories of hope and love that brought these people to Canada.
7 years ago, she found me on Facebook. So I get this text from her. This is a voice from the past. We got together, we fell in love. I packed 2 bags, I left San Francisco, came here, and that's how I became a Canadian citizen for love.
It was a special day for a small group of people out in Scarborough. They're from all over the world, young and old, and today was the day they became Canadians. I attended the ceremony as a guest, and I got a chance to speak to these new citizens afterwards. Take a look.
It's a beautiful moment for you. Join us by raising your right hand and repeating the oath as well. And who knows, If you do that, we might have a shorter winter. All right? You're now a Canadian citizen.
Talk about what it feels like to now be officially a Canadian citizen.
Well, it feels great, but I don't know. It's also kind of a shock because I don't know exactly what to expect. So like, it's all really new to me right now, and I don't know. I hope it's great.
Do you like the snow? Do you like the snow?
Well, I like it and I hate it at the same time. Well, I like it because like you can do so many things with it, but then it's also so cold and you have to get like dressed up. So like it's really cold.
Sound like a real Canadian. You're already complaining about the snow. You're here, buddy.
Yay.
Fari, I hear your journey to Canada is a love story.
Absolutely. So here's a picture of us, my wife and I, in 3rd grade in Iran. This is 40 years ago. The Iranian Revolution, we fell apart. She moved to Canada, I moved to States. She settled here, I settled in San Francisco. 7 years ago, she found me on Facebook. So I get this text from her. This is a voice from the past. We got together, we fell in love. I packed 2 bags, I left San Francisco, came here, and that's how I became a Canadian citizen for love.
It really is the end of a journey, but it's also a beginning of another chapter of the journey where they now contribute to Canada. And when I meet people who have started a business here, who are doctors, we had a pilot today, and we had moms. People who are now going to be raising the next generation of Canadians. How much better can it get? Couple? No.
So talk about how it feels to be a new Canadian.
It feels amazing. It feels amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like trying to hold back our tears almost.
Yeah.
I swear that I will be faithful.
And then now it's citizen.
Talk about it. You seem so excited to become a Canadian today.
It's been a long journey. My mom's over there. She came here first. She did all the hard work. She sacrificed being away from my dad, from me, from my siblings. And yeah, after like 10 years, we're like together now. And then, I don't know, it's been hard, but it's like a learning journey as well. I like the winter now. I like the snow.
No problem.
No problem now, yeah. I love it. It's just like, I was just in the Philippines like last month.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, I can't deal with this.
Heat.
I want to go back.
To the cold in Canada.
Yeah, I want to go back to cold, yeah.
Congratulations, you're now Canadian citizens.
It gives us this amazing chance to learn about our past in a way that we haven't really been able to before.
Digging up the dead in the name of transit? Construction on a new high-speed rail line in Britain has been delayed for years, so archaeologists can go through 10,000 years of history. After the break, why some Britons don't see the point of it.
Disturbing the dead for no particularly good reason. It's like discovering alcohol in a pub. To discover that these people are buried in this graveyard.
It's a kind of treasure trove from the past. 1,000 scientists and conservationists in Britain are working to look at 60 separate archaeological sites that together span 10,000 years of history, all located along a new high-speed train route. Construction has been delayed for 2 years for the archaeologists to do their work, sifting carefully through layers of time. Thomas Daigle gives us this rare look.
A sea of orange on a construction site like no other. This army of archaeologists is unearthing centuries of history so this place can be transformed into a train station for the future.
Because it gives us this amazing chance to learn about our past in a way that we haven't really been able to before.
This was once an Anglican burial ground, now part of Britain's biggest ever archaeological dig.
Imagine in the 1700s and 1800s, a church stood back there. The richer you were, the closer you were buried to the church. That also meant people with less money could be buried all the way over there.
That leaves a huge area to examine and more than 40,000 skeletons to exhume by hand. Turns out London's clay-like earth is good for buried relics, leaving some centuries-old coffins intact and still containing full skeletons. The bones delicately and purposely laid out to be reburied together.
It's all about the dignity and respect for the people who are buried in the burial ground, and that's the utmost driver for us here, really.
Discoveries aside, some neighbors call the project too disruptive and downright eerie.
Disturbing the dead for no particularly good reason. It's like discovering alcohol in a pub. To discover that these people are buried in this graveyard, we knew they were buried in the graveyard.
The search is on for a place nearby that can hold all these remains. It's a big ask indeed, part of a uniquely huge endeavor. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, London.
We tend to talk about the black community like it's a monolith, and it's not, right? There's many black communities.
After the break, bringing blackness back to the stage. Stay with us. We'll be right back. It's the city of Paris like you've never seen it before. A new exhibit at the Art Gallery of Ontario explores the iconic spot in the 1870s. blooming in the age of industry. It's a look at the factories, the workers, and the steam-powered trains, all through the eyes of blockbuster artists like Monet and Van Gogh. Art lovers will see over 120 works as well as films from the period. The exhibit officially opens on Saturday. Almost 50 years since Toronto's first black theatre companies burst onto the stage, there are concerns that representation and diversity has flatlined. The two companies folded in the late 80s, and as Nick Rover tells us, they left a gap that still hasn't been filled.
Everybody is asking, why could it be?
The plays are old, but the content is fresh as ever. From immigration...
Is this Canada?
No, sir, this is Quebec. Boy, this one must really be backward. He can't even read the sign.
to Black history, long before that topic had its own month here in Canada.
The play uses original and historical music to celebrate Canadian heroes like schoolteacher Mary Ann Shea.
Glory, glory.
The plays were produced by Black Theatre Canada and Theatre Fountainhead. In the mid-70s, they became Toronto's first ever Black theatre companies.
So, Emma, what do you remember about the energy of the room when you were putting on those early productions? What was the audience response like in this space?
Ooh, it was incredible. Especially if you're up here, you're looking down. Yeah. It was incredible. You could feel, you get energy from the audience.
Emma Harris directed Black Theatre Canada's first show in 1973.
There was a determination not to be stopped. There was a determination because you weren't coming together for something frivolous. You were talking about your own existence.
And for young actors, there were finally roles that spoke to their life and experience.
Most times you get hired to be in a show, but it's really a white show. So you're just hired to be a white performer who happens to be black.
After a few years of playing token roles, including pimps and drug addicts, Philip Aiken was cast in the Jamaican comedy School's Out.
It gave you an opportunity to actually work on shows that hooked into your culture, your life.
But after runs that included critical successes and awards, both companies folded by 1988.
But for us, it was a reality. It was coming face to face with what we had been talking about. And the more issue-oriented your organization is the less likely you're going to be funded.
Today, only one local black company has risen to take their place. Philip Aiken runs Obsidian Theatre, but his company alone can't cover Toronto's diverse black communities.
We tend to talk about the black community like it's a monolith, and it's not. Right? There's many black communities, and I think a big number of them, a large number of them, are not having their stories brought out.
That is their mission today, and it was the mission back then, too.
Come on down to Bathurst Street. Welcome down to Bathurst Street. Think of the people you will meet on Bathurst Street.
Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
As part of our Struggle and Opportunity series late last year, we spoke to former youth activist Wendy Motion Braithwaite about her work fighting for representation in the arts. That's just one of the stories we're featuring during Black History Month at CBC. Our series and other great stories about the experience of Black Canadians can be found at cbc.ca/being black in Canada. Okay, earlier I said, we want to talk to you because we've gotten through this period, and then you said, after the weekend, it's going back into the deep freeze again?
Yeah, the temperatures, it's like you can't have one without the other. You get the milder temperatures, but then we have the precipitations mix in there. And then, yes, we're going to get some sunshine coming back, and we can count on it a little more, but the temperatures are going to be cold. And that's February for you. But you know what? Valentine's Day tomorrow, so we're almost halfway through, right? That's how I look at it. That's what I love about it. Yeah, just having a quick look at your forecast overnight tonight. We are going to see things calming down because the winds are calming down, so some of these squalls and these bursts of snow that we've been seeing will start to ease up. -6 overnight, feeling like -12. And then tomorrow afternoon, we are going to see this next system move through. It doesn't have a lot of moisture to work with, however, and so it looks like some light, wet flurries.
I was going to say, we see the flurries, Colin.
Yes, they're there. I put them in to the north of us, and then changing to a mix, really turning over to some rain showers because the temperature will actually come up, and by the time we get to Friday morning, 2 degrees. So you'll like that, I know.
Yes.
So, but 0 by tomorrow afternoon. So tomorrow night could be a little messy into Friday morning, but there's not much moisture with this one.
At 2 degrees, we can get some of that snow out of the way.
Melting too, yep.
That's our show for tonight. Thank you for watching. We will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Likewise, as you covered, late night.